Let's go, Lofi Poli Sci, coming at you, people. Michael Pickering here with our good friend Gregory Day, a writer, director, bookseller, and the voice behind Hipsville AD. You know, that fanatical sector god of subcultures who has them fervent ramblings of all breeds of cinematic pleasures. How we doing out there, Gregory Day?
Oh man, I am very excited to be here today. How are you?
Oh, most excellent, most excellent. I'm still getting back into my cozy little closet from the live show, and it's weird recording with you're the first person I recorded with since recording with people in person. So it's like
Mm,
it's a little interesting, weird. Now it's like I don't get to
hmm.
see you, but it's like I
Oh
want to
yeah,
get back into this, you know. But
hell
what are
yeah,
we here to? What are we talking about today? What you got for us?
yeah. It's something I'm very excited about. I bring up a lot on this show, and we're talking about Hong Kong cinema today. So today's going to be an introductory list of Hong Kong cinema.
Dude, I like this one a lot. And you're right, you do talk about it a lot. And I'm going to ask you about that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
towards the end of the show, but let's just dive into it, my friend. What do you got coming in at number 10?
Yeah. Quick preference: this list is going to end at a certain time, so we're going to get. So don't look for anything super relevant here on this list. So, but we'll get into that later. But we're going to start in the 1960s and work our way into a much more modern era here across this list. So we're starting in 1966 with "Come Drink with Me." It's a Shaw Brothers classic, arguably one of the biggest films to kind of like launch the action craze of Hong Kong cinema. This is a film that is of the wuxia variety of action, which is, if you're not familiar with that, it's the more fantasy-driven kung fu movie with people jumping and leaping far, wire work. Sometimes it has fantasy elements, but this one is just more involved with the exaggerated fight scenes, leaping from table to table or through across great distances or so forth. But this is a great story of a woman who is trying to track down a prince who's been kidnapped by these terrorists, and she's disguised as a man, which is something that happens quite a lot in period pieces in Hong Kong cinema. And she's out here, tracking him down, and she just gets into a bunch of different scuffles with these terrorists, and she befriends this drunkard who's kind of hanging around this tavern, and we learn that he is a disgraced monk, and he comes out of hiding once his abbot from his temple joins the villains of the story. And so it's a great action film. It's got it feels like a great MGM musical, except for without the music pieces. It's just these great choreographed fight scenes. So yeah, this is "Come Drink with Me" from 1966. Is a great launching point to get into Hong Kong cinema.
And you got me with this one. I haven't seen it, I'll tell you that. But
Hmm.
what you were talking about with the style of it and launching the style with all the wire working and the great special effects and like the fantasy of what's possible with martial arts and kung fu, would you say this is like the beginnings of where you get like I think more modern audience would know, at least in the US, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, for instance? Does that have like its roots here?
Yeah, I would say yeah. I mean, I think there this wuxia style goes all the way back to literature in Chinese culture, but I think this is like the first massive hit film wise that takes that genre and puts it on screen. But yeah, I think you could see from this film to now, you could see everything from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to Hero, and many of those kinds of films. This is like ground zero for that taking place in cinema.
Yeah, I definitely got the feel of that. But also with the name, "Come Drink with Me," I automatically thought of Drunken Master.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, really? I was like, this is an interesting title for me because it's kind of suggestive. And it made
Hmm.
me wonder, translations from Chinese to English aren't necessarily always perfect. And
Oh,
sometimes, like in marketing in the US, maybe you translate the title in a more suggestive way. Because at this time, 1966, communist China was really hardcore and Mao Zedong was like in power. And I'm curious, like, would a title like this would have it flown? Or is the title in Chinese actually a little
hmm.
bit different than this? I don't know. But
Yeah.
I'd be interested.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I do know like it's not always a one-to-one when a film gets released in English. The title isn't always one-to-one. There's a film on here we'll talk about later. I could give you a better example of the translation, or not even translation, but just how it's changed once it goes to English. But yeah, it's not common that, or it is, I would say, a common occurrence that they just come up with different English titles for films um, outside of China.
And just a real quick behind the scenes, and then we'll cut
Mhm.
to your number 9. But so for instance, a Chinese production company makes this film, does a US company like buy the rights to it and then they're able to change the name in order to play it in the US? Or are they just like leasing it, or do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there could be a few things. Yeah, there's definitely deals to get released in different markets. Um, but sometimes it is like if a film doesn't quite um, translate well from one to one. So, you get a film like a great film like Hapkido, which is it's named after, the martial arts featured in the film, but then once it comes to America, the American audience, the American distributors want to put it in like grindhouses and exploitation cinemas, and so they change it to something like Lady Kung Fu or something like that. So it has a much more appealing title to the audience
I
they're
gotcha.
hoping to bring in. Yeah.
And that was what I was really getting at. Is like, so a US distribution company can have
Mhm.
like some say in changing the names. Okay,
Absolutely,
gotcha,
yes.
gotcha.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right, well, what you got for number 9 for us?
Yeah, number 9, we're hitting into the 70s here, and we have Fist of Fury from 1972. It's the film that made Bruce Lee a movie star. He had been bouncing around doing a few things. He had been in the States in the late 60s doing the Green Hornet TV show, but he could never quite make it as a movie star in America. And so he went back to Hong Kong and he makes Fist of Fury, and he kind of starts to revolutionize the kung fu film. This is his first film. It's very famous for him fighting, a dozen guys in a dojo, and of course, it's got that really great slow motion, hand pose at the end of the film that made him,
Right,
the
right.
the poster idol of kung fu cinema around the world. I mean, this isn't him as big as he is like when you get to Enter the Dragon, but this is like where we start with him really as a movie star. And yeah, this is like a film that kind of breaks the mold of like stagey Shaw Brothers kind of stuff. Like just for context, like Shaw Brothers is a really big movie studio in Hong Kong, like your Warner Brothers or MGM's here in America. Um, and they're mostly known for these like stagey costume period kung fu movies. But when Bruce Lee hits the scene, it's like a modern, it's set more in the modern times. He's got more of a swagger and an attitude, even though he does pay homage to things that come before him, and he's very philosophical, but there is something more of an attitude to his persona on screen that had come before him, which made him very quickly an international star once he was able to break out here. So yeah, this is a great flick, and if you haven't seen this one, I highly recommend it because it's one of the most important kung fu films that ever be released.
I couldn't agree with you more. And this one, of course, I've seen many times over the years. And I think it's more than even just like an important kung fu film. I mean, being the film that Bruce Lee breaks out on, but I think Bruce Lee as an individual helps break out Asian films into a US market. Like, I
100%.
think it's Bruce Lee as an individual who opens up the US just viewer. I'm not even talking about Hollywood or movie producers, but I'm talking about like you,
Mhm.
me, and everyone listening out there. Like, he introduces us as human beings to cinema that is made outside of the US, and he captivates us. And we're just like, what is this Bruce Lee thing? And, after that, suddenly we start getting introduced to not just films from Hong Kong, but inevitably films from South Korea, films from India, from all over the place. Like, I think our introduction to international cinema in many ways starts with Bruce Lee. I mean, would you say, is there someone else you would say that was a bigger part than him?
I mean, not entirely like international cinema, but for Chinese cinema, definitely. I think prior to this, in the 50s and 60s, there's the importing of Japanese cinema that did
Oh,
really
the
well. But
Kurosawas, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
stuff. However, I would say that Chinese cinema was something that wasn't really breaking into the American market, whether it was because of our different political systems, but Hong Kong wasn't a part of that political system. So um, it's
Right.
really,
At the time,
yeah,
Hong Kong
yeah.
was part of the UK's colony.
Right. Yeah. And so at this point, I think for Chinese cinema, because I don't think Chinese cinema doesn't really been, or Hong Kong cinema hadn't really had those great art house international smashes. They're not winning awards at film festivals, and all that kind of stuff. They don't have these revered masters of cinema. Um, their culture is a little more, into the entertainment and massively producing stuff for Hong Kong, who are more moviegoers than we're television watchers. And so when we get a film like this and it becomes an international success, yes, it absolutely did like blow the doors open for the importing of Chinese cinema.
And just imagine, like, as huge of an icon, even today, that Bruce Lee is, he died so young. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't he around like 34-ish or something like that? Do
Something
you
like that,
know?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Imagine, like, at the age that he was, how he revolutionized international film for us, or HK cinema and us seeing it. What if he would have lived to like 60 or 70, or like, how much more would have happened? I don't know. It's just crazy to think about it.
Yeah,
How strong of an effect he had on us, and yet he died at such a young age. If he would have lived
yeah,
on,
yeah. He didn't even
but
make it
as
out
we'll
of the
talk about,
70s. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But as we'll talk about, maybe his legacy lived on, and we'll talk about
Mhm.
that in another film you have coming up. But let's
Oh
go to your
yes.
number 8. What do you got for number 8?
Yeah, number 8 is 8 Diagram Pole Fighter from 1984. This is another Shaw Brothers production, but this is like what I was talking about with Shaw Brothers making these great period pieces. Um, and this one is spectacular. This stars Gordon Liu, who, if you don't know who that is, he was in the Kill Bill films. He played Pai Mei in part 2, but he was one of the big kung fu stars for the Shaw Brothers studio. And this is like a great emotional drama mixed with a kung fu film. It's about a brother, or it's about a royal family who gets slaughtered by an army because they're betrayed by one of their advisors, and he's the only surviving brother. And so he goes to a temple and trains until he can feel comfortable coming back and honoring his family by defeating the bad guys, the other clan. And so it's very emotional, this guy's journey from being kind of a spoiled soldier on his father's army to going to this humble experience in the temple and coming back and righting the wrongs. And it's directed by Lau Kar Lung, who is one of the, if not the greatest, like action, you know, choreographer, director that ever lived. He did The Legend of Drunken Master, the sequel there, and he did The 36 Chambers of Shaolin. And so he's just a really famous filmmaker, but this is his masterpiece. And again, like the Come Drink With Me, this is a film that's hugely influential on kung fu cinema, but also like you can see like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, how it has such an emotional core, and it balances that really well with action. This is where that kind of storytelling comes from.
I'm glad that you mentioned Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon again, and I'm even going to bring up one that you said earlier as well, Hero, a Jet Li film, because I hadn't seen this one before. But one thing that immediately caught me was the cinematography and the vibrant colors
Oh
in
yes.
this film, and like Crouching Tiger, but even Hero, more than that.
Mm-hmm.
They use such these contrasting colors, and not just like having a lot of color in a film, but having deep, vibrant versions of the colors on film that make the film kind of look otherworldly in and of itself. Just because, like, if you think about like the US Western, or even like cop films in the 80s, or action films in the 80s and moving to the 90s, like, yeah, they had color, but US film, to me, I don't think of as having like vibrant colors that really catch you and that are really flashy.
All right.
But this film, without a doubt, I was like, wow, look at the colors, and it just draws you in. And I don't know, I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, this is a spectacular movie. If you really love period piece cinema, or if you love Hong Kong movies, or if you love martial arts films, this is a must see for anybody.
I love all of those things, my friend. So this is a must see. All right.
Yes, yes.
All right. What you got for number 7?
Yeah, number 7, we're talking about Police Story from 1985, the movie that made Jackie Chan like a huge star. He was already famous, but before this film, a lot of his films were dealing with him in the shadow of Bruce Lee. He did make some really great, action comedies, which was like Drunken Master and Snake and Eagle Shadow, things like that. But it's this film from 1985 where he takes his brand of kung fu movies into the modern era. So where Bruce Lee was kind of infusing some things into Fist of Fury to modernize the techniques and the filmmaking of a martial arts film, this movie's literally set in the 80s as opposed to being a production of the 80s, but set in some sort of um, period setting. So it's a hard film to actually describe because it's just Jackie Chan who's trying to stop a drug ring. But the way his films are structured is there's action scene and then there's the comedy bit and him kind of getting into these screwball scenarios. But what it's really famous for is the innovations of action. And so we have it opens with a stellar chase scene that destroys a shanty town, and it's got probably more broken glass than any other film. In its finale, it's a fight scene that sprawls through a mall, and Jackie does a great big stunt at the end, and it kind of set the template for every Jackie film after that, to where he would do a huge stunt in the film versus just showing off great fighting skills. And so this is a great picture. It's this is another one that just changed the game for action cinema as well as Hong Kong cinema. And so this is a huge turning point for the market itself.
I couldn't agree more. And to connect back to our earlier conversation, I think in many ways Jackie Chan is the continuation of the legacy of Bruce Lee, but in a different way. I like that you said, you talked about comedy, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about too. The fact that Jackie Chan likes to bring comedy into his kung fu, and it's set in a modern era.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's one part in the trailer. I haven't seen this one, but I've seen a lot of his other ones. But there's one part in this trailer where he's like hanging from a double-decker bus, and he starts to like try to run up the side of the bus, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like and Jackie Chan's even said, I've seen interviews with him, he loves to use props in his kung fu as kind of like a comedy bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's like doing kung fu with an umbrella and using the opening and closing of the umbrella to like do defense and attack and stuff like that. And I think it's just amazing, and I cannot think of anyone else besides him. Granted, my knowledge of HK cinema and just Chinese kung fu cinema is extremely limited, but I can't think of anyone else who does kung fu comedy, that other than Jackie Chan. And I kind of want to ask you that. So to an American audience, it was what was it? Rush Hour with Chris Tucker that really introduces Jackie Chan and his kung fu comedy to the US. Is it Police Story that really introduces his kung fu comedy? And is that like a Jackie Chan trope, or is there actually like a long line of other kung fu artists who also bring in comedy? Do you know?
No, there wasn't. Jackie really pioneered that. But it wasn't Police Story that he introduced the mix of it. Police Story is really where he really revolutionizes the bringing things into the modern world. And then there was from this point on, just a ton of kung fu films set in urban settings, as opposed to like you could see, the older kung fu films, which were period pieces, or they were set in rural China, those kind of things. But his films, like the original Drunken Master from the late 70s, is really where
I was just thinking about that too.
Yeah,
there was a lot of comedy in that one.
Yeah. So those are the films where he really starts to innovate that comedy style that he has. But I mean, he made so many films before that to where producers wanted him to be Bruce Lee, and Jackie, he just didn't feel like he was that person. He wasn't Bruce Lee, and no one else really was. And so he was
right.
doing
Who else would have been?
And so this is where he had been doing it for a while, but this is like where things really take off in a modern context. But I mean, he also collaborated with Sammo Hung a lot. Sammo Hung is also another great Hong Kong actor and director who's done a lot of comedy with his kung fu films, and they kind of have parallel careers. And then of course post Jackie, you get Stephen Chow, who did like Shaolin Soccer and Kung Fu Hustle, who definitely take from Jackie and Sammo's comedy styles.
Oh, Kung Fu Hustle. I haven't seen that movie in forever. I actually own 2 copies of it on DVD. God, I haven't even thought about that one in a long time. But those films definitely seem to contrast your next pick quite a bit.
Oh,
Why don't you tell us what you got for number 6?
Big time. Yeah, number 6. Had to bring it in here because we got to do one horror pick.
Of course you did.
This is a horror action adventure masterpiece called The Seventh Curse from 1986. This is a film that is a ripoff of the Indiana Jones films, but it's like Indiana
I
Jones by
got that vibe.
yeah, it's like Indiana Jones by way of Evil Dead. But it
Oh, that's a
just kind
weird
of
reference.
yeah, just kind of mix matches a whole bunch of stuff going on in the film. It's about a professor who saves this woman from being sacrificed in this temple, and he gets cursed by this black magic shaman. But then about a year later, the curse comes calling, and he's it's going to kill him if he doesn't go back and try to get the shaman to reverse it. And so um, it's got all manners of weird and wild stuff once they get into the adventure part of it, trying to track down the shaman in the jungles of Thailand. But it's got like these, kung fu skeletons and flying demon babies, and it's got some slimy transforming demon monsters, and it's got a bazooka wielding Chow Yun Fat in it, and it's just a hell of a ride. It's not that scary, but it's a goopy, fun roller coaster of a movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one, and you're not surprised at all. But
Oh
I do
no.
have a couple questions about it. So
Hmm.
like two questions really. And one's about Chow Yun Fat and the other's about
Yeah.
HK horror in general.
Hmm.
Was Chow Yun Fat like does he really do any other horror besides this one, or was this one kind of like an oddball film for him to do?
I honestly think this is an oddball film for him to do,
Okay.
because I've seen quite a few of his films, and I can't think of another horror film that he is in. But for
That's kind of what
context,
I thought too. Yeah.
yeah, for context, he was making like 12 movies a year when during the 80s. Yeah,
Gah.
he was never off. Like he was, and sometimes we were shooting them simultaneously. So he's not the star of this movie. He only has like maybe 3 or 4 scenes in it. Um, but yeah, for context, like how hardworking a
Gotcha.
lot of these guys were. So yeah, he just, I don't, maybe it just didn't work out where he was in more horror films, but this is a hell of a one to be in if he only made one of them. Yeah.
And my other question was, how often did horror come up in the HK movement? Was it a big thing or not?
No, no, it's not a big thing. I wanted to feature
Okay.
this one here because there's not a lot of horror films actually from the Hong Kong tradition. There are a good handful of them. The Boxer's Omen being another one that we've discussed on this
Right,
podcast.
right.
But yeah, it was for some reason, and I don't know why, but from what I've read and heard in interviews, that it just wasn't a bankable genre for Hong Kong's audiences, and especially when it gets into like creature effects, they didn't really have the money to compete with the Americans. And so if American film opened like The Thing or something like that, they had these really great polished visual effects. Once the Hong Kong version came out, people kind of scoffed at them because they were cheesy or not, or limited in ways. So
Right,
yeah, for some
right.
reason it just never took off. But there, if you're like into some of the most wild horror films you're ever going to see, check out some Hong Kong horror films because those things are wild.
I will take your word for it, buddy. All right, where are you bringing us next with number five? We're staying with Chow Yun Fat, right?
Yeah, we're staying with Chow Yun Fat for this one, but
And
this
one we've
is
talked about before.
yeah, at number five we got A Better Tomorrow from 1986. This is John Woo's breakout film. He made several films before this, but this is a film that introduces his not only his action style of filmmaking, but it also his first collaboration with Chow Yun Fat, and it really knocked kung fu out of its precious spot in the box office market, and supplanted it with his style of what is called heroic bloodshed films, which is hyper violent shootout movies that deal with honor and loyalty amongst thieves or cops, or very very hyper masculine films. But the interesting thing about this movie is that while it is an action film, it is the first film on this list to start dealing with political ideas that are infused into the sensational style of Hong Kong movies. This is starting to criticize the capitalist society, but also kind of this lingering anxiety about what is going to happen if we don't have any money or a way out of Hong Kong, with the handover coming very soon. It was signed into, I'm not sure how you would say it, but it was signed between the Chinese and the British in 1984 that the handover would effectively go through without a hitch in 1997. And so these late 80s films start to address this concern, and A Better Tomorrow starts to deal with like desperate characters trying to find their lot in life before the handover starts. And so this is a very pivotal film for Hong Kong cinema because it changes not only the attitude of the cinema, but you start to get into like really dark urban stories.
Yeah, when we talked about it last time, I brought up the fact that like the Chow Yun Fat lighting a cigarette by burning $100 bill and
Yes.
lighting it with the $100 bill. It's
Mhm.
such an iconic image that you would light a cigarette with $100 bill that's on fire. Like you're saying, money is nothing to me, or you're saying, Western capitalism. What do I care? Or you're like,
Yeah.
like there's so much you could take
Mhm.
just from that image. And you're right. Like Hong Kong citizens are hyper aware at this point that the handover is coming. And I don't find it surprising at all that you start to see that picked up in film. You move away from the traditional kung fu cinema and you start to get into more of like an urban lifestyle of like, okay, what's going on? What is going to go on? And like people are thinking, and there's a lot of question marks. Yeah, I like this one a lot too. But I don't want to dive too much into it because I know we have a couple of your choices coming up that will definitely dive into it even more with the handover.
Oh yeah.
So what do you got coming in at number 4?
Yeah, number four, switching gears a little bit into a film called Peking Opera Blues from 1986. This is a big crowd-pleasing movie. It mixes a bunch of genres. It's just like a big blockbuster kind of film. It's a period piece, but it's also a drama. Excuse me, it's also a comedy and an espionage action drama set in the early 1900s. And it's about the daughter of a general, a grifter, and the daughter of a Peking opera um, director who are kind of trapped in this espionage plot to get some papers from the general and get it over to the rebels so that they can overthrow the government. But we're on the cusp of the revolution here in China, and it's just this comedy of manners a little bit, but it's also talking about the politics of Chinese art, or how women can't participate in that. But it's got a great comedy, situational comedy, and then the stellar action, all at the same time. Um, and so, yeah, this is a hard movie to find, but if you're looking for like a movie that is, akin to like some of our American blockbusters that just check off every entertainment box you can imagine, um, this is a great pick.
I don't find it surprising at all, too, at the time, because of the conversation we just had, but also in
Mhm.
1986, you have a film that is dealing with China right at the cusp of the Civil War. And the Civil War that leads into and sparks the communist revolution that leads to what China is today. And I haven't seen this one, but I like this trailer for so many different reasons. Again, like the cinematography and the colors are great, but also like you could tell this isn't your stereotypical kung fu film. It's not your stereotypical triad gangster film or a cop film or anything like that. But it brings in the Chinese opera, which is world famous. For lo-fi listeners out there who
Mhm.
don't know, like the Chinese opera and the Peking opera are extremely well known and have been known for so long. So to see an HK film bring that in and kind of celebrate it, I think it's really cool because I think a lot of Western audiences and US audiences, when they think HK cinema or Chinese cinema, they think, Bruce Lee, Kung Fu, or Chow Yun Fat, and gangster or cop films, and they don't necessarily think about Chinese opera or Peking opera. So I like this pick. I liked it a whole lot. Well done, well done. Well, what you got coming in for number 3 with
Yeah,
us?
number
Going a little
three.
bit different again, huh?
Yeah, slightly. This is City on Fire from 1987. Um, I think this film is very akin to A Better Tomorrow in that it's a big Chow Yun Fat star vehicle, but this is a much darker film. It's a cops and robbers film about a cop that goes undercover to try to stop this diamond heist crew. But while it is a great action film, what it's really about is how callous the police are in Hong Kong and how expendable Chow Yun Fat's character is. And it explores how desperate the diamond heist criminals are. So the criminal crew are to make a quick buck and to find their prosperity because time is running out before their freedoms are going to be are given up, and so they're what options do they have in this society that feels like it's under a lot of pressure. um, it's really famous in the West because the like last quarter of this film was basically lifted and is the entirety of Reservoir Dogs. But it's so much more than that. It's got so many layers that to exploring, the pressure cooker of this society that this is just a masterpiece of political cinema.
I dig this one a whole lot, and this is, I think, your third Chow Yun Fat movie, and it really got me to start thinking. Like, I think he's a wonderful actor. I think he's very
Mhm.
symbolic for the movement, and it made me want to ask you: would you say that in some ways he's kind of like one of the HK cinema actors there are, or like maybe at the like, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Like, internationally, when people think of HK cinema, do you attribute Chow Yun Fat as being an actor who helped bring HK cinema to the international audience?
Yeah, he's definitely one of them. Like for his time period, before him it was Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and Gordon Liu and some other action film or action stars. But I think with him, it's like even though he's in some slight action films, he's not a action star first and an actor second. He's an actor first, and so he's one of the first like real actors from Hong Kong to break into the American audience or the international audience. But yeah, like I said earlier, like, during this time he was making so many films that he is just in all of these. Like, you can make a top 10 greatest hits of 80s films from Hong Kong, and you could just do 10 Chow Yun Fat films because he was in so many of them. And so yeah, he's undeniably one of the great actors from Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured. And you made me think, like, people are always saying, "Oh, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson's the hardest working person in Hollywood." And I'm like, really? I was like, did he ever make 12 movies in 1 year? I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and they're all
Anyway,
wildly
anyway,
different.
anyway.
Like, yeah, if you watch enough Chow Yun Fat films, you could see films where he is absolutely goofy in them. But if you only know him from like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, you think he's this, the stately performer. But yeah, he's got a very dynamic range.
Yes, to that effect, I always make me think of a Bulletproof Monk.
Oh,
Of course, that's like an American-made movie, but still,
yes,
like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right, what you got for us at number two?
Yeah, number two is Chungking Express. We're getting into the 90s here. It came out in 94. And yeah, this is a great romantic comedy from Wong Kar-wai, perhaps the most romantic filmmaker to ever live. It's a story of two lonely cops and the women that are complicating their lives. But it's just a addictively fun film. Yet it does have some underlying depictions of the loneliness of Hong Kong life and again, like the desperate living of drug smuggling or trying to find yourself in your profession, or what's the point of your life, and kind of walking through the city of 6 million people live in this city, and just the disconnect that exists in this place. And these four characters, it's split into two stories, and so it's two and two of the characters, but just how difficult it is to connect even romantically with someone who's right in front of you. It's got a hell of a lot of style. Wong Kar-wai has a completely different style than any other film on this list. And so it's action is very different, and the editing is very different. It's much more influenced by European cinema. But yeah, this is kind of where the cinema took a more of a art house internationally praised step in that direction. But yeah, I would highly recommend this film.
It looked fantastic, and it did make me think of. I hadn't seen it, but it made me think of the romance. It also made me think, tying it into like a cop or a gangster film,
Mhm.
but in a completely different kind of way. And I definitely got the vibe of like art house film. And was it just me, or did they do a Chinese version of the Cranberries? Um,
Yes, there
I
is a
thought so, and I
yeah,
was like, wow, that was amazing. Like,
yes.
I mean, granted, I'm already a Cranberries fan, but like a Chinese cover of it, it sounded completely incredible.
Yeah, one
Um,
of the stars of this film is a canto pop star, and so she does a cover of it. I believe the song is "Dreams" by the Cranberries, and she does the Cantonese cover of it.
oh yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And one of the actors I know really well from other films. I think
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't
Uh-huh.
have time to look it up, but I
Yeah.
think either like
Yeah. Tony Leung is in this film,
was it
which
House
he
of the Flying Dragons or
He's in Hero.
Or
I can't remember
Hero,
if he's
that
in.
was it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember if he's in House of Flying Daggers, but he's in this. He's in the Mood for Love. He was in Infernal Affairs, but he was also in Shang-Chi. He played Shang-Chi's father.
Oh
That
yeah,
just came
right,
out.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this one looked incredible. Like for real, it's on my side list of ones to go back and
Oh
watch,
yeah,
just
yeah.
because it gave such a distinctly different feel
Hmm.
of where of the journey you've really taken us on. Because for listeners, like you don't have it in front of you, but there's a time progression of every single one of these movies that Gregory Day's been leading us on. And going back all the way to, what was the number 10, Come Drank With We, was 1966.
Hmm.
Then the next one, 1972, then 1984, then 85, then 86, 86, 87, 80, 94, and it's like these are in a chronological order, and it's just kind of, you can feel whenever they're in chronological order, and then you think about what all of these are about. Like there's a story, a meta story going on here, talking about HK cinema, that I think, let's move on to your number one, and then we can really dive into what that story is.
Yeah, number one is a film that obviously picked it to be number one because this is from the year 1997, which is the year of the handover. It's called Made in Hong Kong, and this is like one of the first truly independently made films that come out of Hong Kong, and it of course is about disaffected youth and criminal life in Hong Kong and the aimlessness of life in this city as it changes from this westernized democratic society being incorporated into China. And so this is a film that has a lot of influence from the new wave. Like you could see like a film like 400 Blows definitely influencing this film of like talking about where is our society right now and what do young people have to look forward to. And so it's just it's not very plot driven, so it's very situationally driven as these characters are trying to make sense of their lives and make money and survive um, in this city with whether futures in question. So I had to put it here because this is it. This is the end of Hong Kong cinema. That's not to say that there is more. There aren't movies made in Hong Kong after that, but Hong Kong ceases to be its own identity. It's now Chinese after that, and so this is where I wanted the list to end. We could talk about other great films that have come out of there post this, but it's no longer doesn't it's no longer a regional cinema, and so this is a great place to end it.
This one is one that I'm going to check out. Made in Hong Kong, 1997. I'd never heard about this, but the name alone, and it being that year. Also, I would like to know, like, if it is a word, one for one word translation in Chinese. Like,
Mhm.
that'd be kind of curious.
Yeah.
But this trailer drew me in so much, and it had a totally different feel from all of the other films. I got way more of a modern sense of like
Hmm.
apprehension and drugs and alcohol and sex and crime, and all mixed into a film. And no kung fu, no buddy cop movie. It was just like, it felt like it was a tale of people on the cusp of society changing. And it was, in 1997, the UK ended colonization in Hong Kong and handed Hong Kong over to China. And this movie comes out that same year, and it's not by chance. Like, this is a major narrative about the where everyone in the city was going to go moving forward. I'm definitely going to look into this movie, because I think you're right. There are definitely films that come later that are produced in Hong
Hmm.
Kong, shot in Hong Kong, everything financed in Hong Kong.
Hmm.
But every last one of them now is made following Beijing China Communist Party laws and rules. And that's limiting what you can speak about, what you can talk about, what you can film about in a huge kind of way.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe one day we have a talk about, maybe not a whole top 10 list, but just like a little special episode about the difference between HK cinema post and pre the handover and how it changed one day. That'd be kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. But there you go. That's Gregory Day's top 10 HK cinema list. And, got a few questions for you like we always do. And first, I want to start off with, why you picked this list. And it made me think, your first list ever on the show over a year ago now was Introduction to East Asian Cinema. And you did have some HK film in it. But why did you decide you wanted to do an entire list about HK cinema this time?
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about, here and there over the course of me being on this show, which thank you for always having me.
Of course.
But yeah, I felt like it was time to kind of explain why I love this regional cinema so much, and spotlight like an introduction to it. And so yeah, I wanted to do this list to kind of talk about this exciting cinema, and different places around the world, they have flavors to their cinema. Some of them are more artsier, some of them are more exploitative, or some of them are much more driven by box office. But something about Hong Kong cinema, it's just the most spectacular kind of filmmaking on the planet. Like these films were go for broke. Everything about them is just entertainment value, in every single scene. Some of the things don't translate well to American audiences, like their humor. I don't think 100% translates, but or the way that tonal shifts happen in their films between humor and action or drama. But the more you watch them, the more you can kind of understand the language that they're using. But it's just sensational cinema, in every single one of them, whether it's a drama or like Chungking Express, where it's got this fantastic style, or Eight Diagram Pole Fighter, where it's just got the colors and the action, and so they're always putting 110% into every aspect of their films. And so yeah, it's just a great cinema, and so that's why I wanted to come on here and talk about it.
All good stuff, all good stuff. So I guess if there were to be a top 10 list of your favorite movie genres, this would be number one?
As a genre, no. I mean, I wouldn't consider it a genre. But I think if I did something like, but it could almost be considered that, but I don't know if it would be.
Oh, I got you, like a movement.
Yeah, a movement or a regional cinema.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, did you have any runners up you want to give a quick little shout out to, show some love? Because 10,
absolutely,
like you said, you could do a 10 of like just Chow Yun Fat. So I mean, I imagine you got some other love you want to shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. These are a couple of films I couldn't fit in here because they felt a little redundant to put it in. But I have two 80s picks that are phenomenal. Tiger Cage 2, which is a very young Donnie Yen flick that is just bonkers. Action from the moment go to the time that the credits hits. You don't need to see Tiger Cage 1 to enjoy this film, because they are there's a series called Tiger Cage, but they don't really have anything to do with each other. I don't know if it's a box office ploy or whatever, but this is a film directed by Yin Wu Ping, who of course we all know from being the choreographer on Kill Bill and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And so that guy never made a disappointing action scene in his life, and so this is a great one. But also Yes Madam, which is also from the 80s, which is Michelle Yeoh's first film. And it stars her and Cynthia Rothrock as two tough cops in Hong Kong, and it's just got stellar action and an unbelievable climax that even if you're not into these kinds of films but you love action movies, you just go watch the end of Yes Madam on YouTube, you're going to be blown away. So those two films, just insanity in the action genre.
I dig it. Especially Michelle Yeoh. She's one of my favorite actresses out of there. What a great actress, and still working today, still in stuff all the time that we see regularly.
Everything Everywhere All at Once just came out this year. Great movie.
Yeah, I want to see that one. I had some people recommend it a lot. And she was also in Shang-Chi. So I mean, still like all over the place.
Yeah.
And for my next question, you kind of already answered it, so I'm gonna change it up and something I think that's been missing for me from your list and the conversation. Jet Li, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
Like now, granted, like I said, I don't really know a whole lot about the HK cinema movement like you do or anything, but especially from like a US perspective, Jet Li was one of the people who broke into the US big. In like the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, like his films started hitting. And you had things like Romeo Must Die, or The Defender, and several other ones that he just started hitting big in. And in like Lethal Weapon 4, he was in that.
Yeah.
I haven't heard you talk about any of his movies. So I'm curious, is Jet Li just known to Western audiences? And like, where does he fit into the Hong Kong movement in comparison to like some of the other films and actors that we've been talking about?
Yeah, no, he's a huge star in Hong Kong before he came to America. I think Lethal Weapon might have been his first American movie, but he was in quite a few films, especially the Once Upon a Time in China movies that were in the mid '90s. But full disclosure, I think I do have some blind spots for him and Donnie Yen. There's a couple guys that I need to really beef up my knowledge on. But yeah, no. To answer your question, he was definitely a big star in Hong Kong before coming to America.
Gotcha. And I kind of feel like Donnie Yen too. He's another HK actor that I feel branched out into a Western audience pretty early on, and it's pretty well known. But I was just curious because like you don't hear as much about either of them. Now the Once Upon a Time trilogy, I think it is, that Jet Li did. I saw the first one. I didn't see the second two. And what was Donnie Yen? He did the ones where was he like the teacher of Bruce Lee in the movies?
Yeah, yeah. More recently, I think in the 2000s, he did the series of films about Ip Man.
That's what I was thinking of. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, big people, the world, really well known. But I wasn't. I didn't know how far back their careers went. I kind of feel like they're more modern than your Chow Yun-fat or your Jackie Chan. On a weird side note, I had noticed that on one of the streaming platforms, Jackie Chan had this cartoon series called Jackie Chan Adventures. And it's like Indiana Jones meets Jackie Chan. And I watched a few episodes. Pretty cool. Anyway, sidetracking. All right. Now let's wrap it down to the questions we always get back to, my friends. And I feel one of them you kind of already answered, but you can maybe home in on a little bit, or you can focus on the second one. It's up to you. But we go over these lists and talk about all these different movies, but I always want to know, why is this list important to you, and why should other people view this list as important as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did talk about this is important to me because I just absolutely love these films that so many people put so much effort into making, and they make them to be the best possible film they can make, whether it's through the action or the comedy. But these people put a lot of hard work in. And I think action cinema wouldn't be what it is today around the world if it wasn't for this little area, in Asia, where they just revolutionized everything about the action cinema. But I think what people should watch them is because these films aren't being made anymore. Like you go see any action film today, and now you're going to get good fight choreography, or you're going to get a CGI mess fest. That's just hard on the eyes to watch. But if you go back and you watch these films, it's like watching, the Ramones after listening to a lot of pop punk, and you're just seeing like where these things were created. And so, yeah, I think it's a lost cinema, obviously because of geopolitical reasons, but I think it's got a lot of characteristics in it that have been lost to time and deserve to be remembered.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's really less than 30 years that things have changed so drastically. So I feel like if we don't keep it alive now, then what hope is there in the future to keep it alive, right?
Yeah.
Well, superb stuff right there, my friend. But before we let you go, why don't you tell all the good listeners what you have going on lately, and where can they find you on the interwebs?
Yeah. You can find me on bad.daysubstack.com or baddaysubstack.com, excuse me. To check out my blog, Hipsville AD over there, taking a little hiatus after Halloween, but I'll be back soon enough. And then you can find me Hipsville AD on Instagram.
Oh, I'll be interested to see what you're getting into post-Halloween, that's for sure. All right, well, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on, as always.
Thanks for having me.
And that's Hipsville AD's Top 10 list. Check out our friend Gregory Day online. Follow him everywhere, people. And interested in writing in the show? Check us out on Instagram, myself on LinkedIn. Definitely check out lofipolisci.com. And always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Talk to you soon, Lofi listeners. Pickering and Day, signing off.
Goodbye, folks.